Progeny. We have been discussing how changes in DNA during cell division would lead to changes in proteins that are made from this new DNA. Another point that has been made in that these changes would accumulate from one generation to the next. Could this be used to trace the changes in DNA backwards in time and find out where each diverged from the other? Molecular progeny does exactly this. This approach is based on the idea that organisms which are more distantly related will accumulate a greater number of differences in their DNA. Such studies trace that the evolutionary relationships, and it has been highly gratifying to find that the relationships among different organisms shown by molecular progeny match the classification scheme that we learned in class 9th. Evolution should not be equated with progenies. Proges. In an exercise of tracing the family tree of species, we need to remember certain things. Firstly, there are multiple branches possible at each and every stage of this process, so it is not as if one species is eliminated to give rise to a new one. A new species has emerged, but that does not necessarily mean that the beetle example we have been thinking about, that old species will disappear. It will depend on the environment. Also, it is not as if the newly generated species are in any way better than the older ones. It is just the natural selection and genetic drift have together led to the formation of a population that cannot reproduce with the original one. So, for example, if it is not true that human beings have evolved from chimpanzees, rather, both human beings and chimpanzees have common ancestors a long time ago. That common ancestors is likely to have neither human or chimpanzees. Also, the first step of separation from the ancestors is unlikely to have resulted in modern chimpanzees and human beings. Instead, the two resultant species have probably evolved in their own separate ways to give rise to current forms. In fact, there is no real progress in the idea of evolution. Evolution is simply the generation of diversity and the shaping of the diversity by environmental selection. The only progressive trend in evolution seem to be the more and more complex body designs have emerged over time. However, again, it is not as if the older designs are inefficient. So many of the older and simpler designs still survive. In fact, one of the simplest life forms, bacteria, inhabit the most inhospitable habits like hot springs, deep sea, thermal thermal vents, and the ice in Antarctica. In other words, human beings are not the pencil of evolution, but simply yet another species is teeming spectrum of evolving life.